Millionaire sees his ex-wife pregnant, working as a waitress. What happened next changed everything. Ethan Tan had a solid gold Mont Blanc pen suspended in the air, just 3 millimeters from signing the most lucrative contract of his life when the entire world stopped spinning. He was seated at the main table of the Fullerton Bay restaurant, the most exclusive and elite dining establishment in Marina Bay, Singapore. Around him, 3 real estate executives awaited his signature to close a SGD 15 million acquisition. Everything was perfect. Ethan's navy blue suit, impeccable, custom-made, without a tie, yet projecting the absolute power of a 2-year-old man who had conquered the city. His short, perfectly sculpted beard, his dominant posture. He was the king of his world, a man who always won, a man who had overcome the greatest humiliation of his life, or so he believed. His gaze, cold and calculating, drifted for a second from the paper on the white linen table, and that's when he saw her. The impact stole the oxygen from his lungs. It was like crashing into a concrete wall at 200 kilometers per hour. About 15 meters away, in the dimly lit section of the hall, a woman was cleaning a table. The contrast was violent, almost grotesque. Amidst the elegant decor of golden tones, marble, and fine crystal, the woman wore a bright orange, cheap, and worn cleaning uniform with white collars and borders. She was completely out of place. But it wasn't the uniform that paralyzed Ethan. It was her, Serena, his ex-wife. The pen slipped from Ethan's fingers and hit the glass table with a dry thud, staining the multi-million-dollar document with a thick drop of black ink. "Everything in order, Ethan?" one of the executives asked with a frown. Ethan didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't breathe. His dark eyes were fixated on the woman in the distance. His mind, accustomed to processing numbers and strategies in fractions of a second, collapsed before the irrational image in front of him. 9 months ago, Serena Lim, the woman he had loved with blind devotion, had thrown divorce papers in his face. She had told him she was fed up with him, that she had found someone better, someone who actually had time for her, and had left without taking a single cent, supposedly to live a life of luxury in Europe with a European scion. Ethan had spent almost a year hating her, swallowing the poison of betrayal, drowning his pain in work, until he became an untouchable, cold property magnate. But the woman 15 meters away wasn't in Paris, wasn't adorned with jewels or dressed in haute couture. Serena was frantically, erratically scrubbing a wooden table with a white cloth, as if her life depended on removing a sauce stain. Her light brown hair, which always fell in perfect waves, was now pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her fair skin was flushed. Thick drops of sweat ran down her forehead and neck. She looked gaunt, pale, with deep violet circles under her eyes, her gaze fixed downwards, utterly broken. And then Serena turned sideways to reach the other end of the table. Ethan's heart stopped dead. Beneath that suffocating, cheap orange uniform, Serena's belly was enormous, round, heavy, and low. A very advanced pregnancy, at least 8 months. Ethan's brain performed the mathematical calculation with lightning speed. 9 months of divorce, 8 months of pregnancy. "No," Ethan murmured, his voice rough, barely a whisper in his throat. "Ethan, Mr. Tan?" insisted the lawyer from across the table, alarmed by the cadaverous pallor that had covered the businessman's face. Ethan stood up with a shove. The heavy oak chair screeched violently against the marble floor, attracting curious glances from nearby tables. Ethan didn't care. He didn't care about the contract, or the SGD 15 million, or his reputation. All the noise of the luxurious restaurant, the clinking of baccarat crystal glasses, the silver cutlery, the soft laughter of Singapore's elite, faded, turning into a dull hum. He only saw her. Serena paused for a second, dropped the cloth on the table, and put a hand to her lower back, arching with an expression of mute pain. She was breathing through her mouth, exhausted, as if the weight of her own body and the creature within her were about to break her spine. This woman, who once owned half of his empire, the woman who walked with her head held high and a radiant smile, now looked like a cornered animal on the verge of physical collapse. Ethan took his first step towards her. His fists were so clenched at his sides beneath his navy blue suit that his knuckles turned white. A toxic mixture of anger, confusion, and visceral panic began to boil in his veins. What the hell was going on? Where was the millionaire lover? Why was the woman who destroyed his life cleaning other people's messes? And whose child was this that deformed her body and forced her to drag her feet? Ethan advanced down the central aisle, dodging a waiter. His gaze, serious, implacable, and contemplative, never left her. He was going to demand answers. He was going to destroy her with words if necessary. He was going to make her pay for every sleepless night. But before he could reach her, another figure stepped into the scene, blocking Serena's path. It was Mr. Cheng, the general manager of the Fullerton Bay restaurant, a 4-5-year-old man in an immaculate gray suit, with a tense face and the arrogance of someone who enjoys humiliating those beneath his status. Ethan stopped 3 meters away, partially hidden by a large marble pillar and an extravagant floral arrangement. He was close enough to hear everything, but out of his ex-wife's line of sight. Mr. Cheng looked at the table Serena had just cleaned and then ran an index finger along the wooden edge, lifting it into the air with disgust, as if he had touched something radioactive. "You call this clean, Lim?" the manager hissed. His voice was low but laden with venom, designed not to disturb the rich clients, but perfect for devastating his employee. "I pay you to make this place shine, not to spread dirt from one side to the other." Serena immediately lowered her head. Ethan felt a sharp pang in his chest at seeing that gesture. The Serena he knew would never, under any circumstances, bow her head to anyone. She was fierce, proud, a woman who wouldn't be trampled. Now her chin touched her chest in an act of absolute submission. I'm sorry, Mr. Cheng," Serena replied, her voice trembling, hoarser from dehydration. "I'll wipe it down with disinfectant again right away. I just got a little dizzy, just for a second." "I don't care about your third-rate excuses," Mr. Cheng cut her off, approaching her intimidatingly. Serena, with difficulty due to her enormous belly, took an awkward step backward. "You've been dragging yourself around the hall all week. If you keep moving like a snail, you're out on the street today." "No, please," she begged, looking up for the first time. Ethan's eyes widened at the sight of absolute terror on the face of the woman he loved. "Mr. Cheng, please, I need this job. The rent is due Friday, and I don't have money for the polyclinic. I swear I'll be faster. Don't fire me. I beg you." The sound of Serena's plea pierced Ethan's chest like a jagged knife. He felt blood pumping in his ears. The anger he felt towards her just 2 minutes ago was mutating into a dark, primitive, and dangerous instinct. He wanted to kill Mr. Cheng with his own hands. "That belly you're carrying isn't my problem, Lim." Mr. Cheng spat, pointing at the enormous belly beneath the orange uniform. "I don't give a damn if you're pregnant. Nobody forced you to open your legs. You're here to work. If you can't keep up because your child is too heavy, go beg for alms on the street, where you belong. You have 3 minutes to leave this area spotless, or you grab your rubbish and leave. Understood?" The cruelty of the words echoed in the small area. A thick, silent tear rolled down Serena's cheek, mixing with sweat. She pressed her lips together, holding back a sob, and nodded frantically. "Yes, sir, understood. I'll leave it spotless," she mumbled, grabbing the cloth with uncontrollably trembling hands and beginning to rub the wood desperately, bending her body with evident agony. Mr. Cheng smiled with satisfaction, adjusted his lapels, and turned to leave. But he didn't get far. A hand the size of a dinner plate closed around his neck from behind, gripping the fabric of his gray suit with such force that his shirt buttons threatened to burst. The manager choked on a gasping sound as he was violently pulled backward. He came face to face with the shadowed countenance of Ethan Tan. Ethan's eyes were no longer those of a calculating businessman. They were those of a predator, a second away from tearing his prey apart. "Do you have a problem with her, you piece of trash?" Ethan growled, his voice resonating in a deep, lethal baritone, loud enough to instantly silence the murmuring from nearby tables. Mr. Cheng blanched to the color of ash. He knew Ethan Tan. All of Singapore's elite knew the property tycoon. He was one of the city's most important and feared clients. "Mr. Tan," the manager stammered, trembling under the grip that threatened to cut off his breath. "I was just correcting the staff. I didn't mean to disturb you." The sound of the name Tan had an electric effect 2 meters away. Serena, who was scrubbing the table with tear-filled eyes, froze completely. The white cloth slipped from her fingers, falling in slow motion to the floor. Oxygen seemed to be absorbed from the room. Slowly, with absolute terror disfiguring her features, Serena turned her face. Her breathing stopped. Her hands instinctively clung to the sides of her swollen belly, as if trying to protect the baby from the gaze that was approaching. Ethan released Mr. Cheng with a brutal shove, making the manager stumble and fall to his knees on the marble. But Ethan was no longer looking at the man on the floor. His eyes were fixed directly on Serena. The silence in the restaurant was sepulchral. The eyes of the millionaires around were fixed on the scene. The tension was so dense it could be cut with a crystal. Ethan looked her up and down. The humiliating uniform, the dark circles under her eyes, the panic in her brown eyes, and finally, that enormous, 8-month belly. Serena recoiled a step, bumping into a tray of empty glasses that a waiter had left nearby. The tray crashed to the floor. The sound of glass shattering into 1,000 pieces broke the silence like a gunshot, but neither of them flinched. They were face to face, the betrayed millionaire and the destroyed ex-wife. Ethan, Serena whispered, her lips trembling uncontrollably, taking another step back, wanting to disappear, to flee, to die before he asked the one question she had sworn never to answer. Ethan took a step towards her, crushing the broken glass with his Italian shoes, his eyes burning with pain and rage. Months, Serena. Ethan's voice was low, rough, and resonated in the absolute silence. Months since you fled. Ethan lowered his gaze to her belly, the calculation gleaming like a death sentence in his pupils. 8 months pregnant. Serena covered her mouth with her hands, stifling a choked sob, backing up until her back hit the wall. There was no escape. The wall she had built to protect him from the truth had just collapsed before her eyes. The silence in the Fullerton Bay restaurant was absolute, thick, almost suffocating. The dozens of millionaire diners, accustomed to complaining if the wine wasn't at the exact temperature, now held their breath. No one moved a muscle. On the marble floor, Mr. Cheng, the feared manager, remained on his knees, rubbing his reddened neck, paralyzed by the contained violence emanating from Ethan Tan's navy blue suit. But Ethan saw no one else. The entire world had narrowed to the woman cornered against the wall, Serena, his Serena, or the woman she once was. Ethan's brain, a machine trained to devour financial data and detect fraud in seconds, now worked at dizzying speed, but not with bank account numbers, but with months, with dates, with memories that burned his blood. 9 exact months since that rainy afternoon when she threw the wedding rings onto the granite countertop of their good-class bungalow. 9 months since she looked at him with glacial contempt, claiming he wasn't enough, that she had found a real man, a European businessman who would give her the world Ethan denied her by always working. 9 months since she disappeared without a trace, blocking his calls, erasing herself from the map. And now, in front of him, a belly that screamed the anatomical truth, impossible to hide. 8 months. The exchange of glances was devastating. Ethan searched Serena's brown eyes for the cold, calculating woman who had abandoned him, but he didn't find her. Instead, he only saw a wounded, terrified animal. Her thin, rough hands, once always adorned with perfect manicures and diamonds, were now red, cracked by cleaning chemicals, and clung to her swollen belly with an instinctive protective force. 8 months. Ethan's voice was not a shout. It was a hoarse whisper, laden with a poison that paralyzed Serena. You are 8 months pregnant. Serena swallowed. Panic oppressed her chest, cutting off her breath. Her eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. She knew Ethan was brilliant. She knew he wouldn't take more than 5 seconds to do the math. If she had left 9 months ago, and the baby was 8 months old, the conception occurred exactly in the weeks leading up to the divorce. Weeks when they still shared the same bed. Ethan, please, she pleaded in a whisper, pressing herself against the fine wooden wall, as if wanting to merge with it. Go, don't make a scene here. Go away? Ethan let out a dry, humorless laugh, a sound that made the nearest waiters tremble. Don't make a scene? You disappear. You destroy my life. Tell me you're going to Paris with a magnate who will treat you like a queen. And I find you cleaning filth in Singapore, starving and about to give birth. Ethan took a step forward, shortening the distance. His imposing figure covered Serena with his shadow. The scent of his expensive cologne, wood, and spices hit Serena, unearthing 1,000 memories that struck her like a hammer to the stomach. The math doesn't add up, Serena. Ethan raised his voice for the first time, a roar that echoed in the double-height ceiling of the restaurant. 9 months since I saw you, 8 months pregnant. Who is the father? The question floated in the air like a death sentence. Mr. Cheng, from the floor, tried to intervene, terrified of losing his job or the prestige of the place. Mr. Tan, if the employee is inconveniencing you, security can escort her out the service door immediately. Ethan didn't even look at him. He turned his face barely a millimeter, his dark eyes distilling a murderous fury. If you open your mouth again to call her employee or try to touch her, I swear to God I will buy this restaurant today just to have the pleasure of destroying it with you inside. Shut up and don't move. Mr. Cheng blanched and cowered, clamping his mouth shut. Serena seized that second of distraction. The instinct for survival, or rather, the instinct to protect the secret that had cost her everything, took hold. She couldn't let him ask questions. She couldn't let him investigate. If Ethan discovered the truth, the men who had threatened her would come after him, put him in Changi prison, or worse. With a quick movement, fueled by pure adrenaline, Serena clumsily pushed a chair into the aisle, blocking Ethan's path, and ran, or at least tried. Running with the weight of an 8-month pregnancy in a malnourished body was more of a desperate stumble. She spun on her worn rubber heels and dashed towards the swinging kitchen doors. "Serena!" Ethan roared, surprise freezing him for a microsecond before his long strides reacted. She pushed open the metallic kitchen doors with both hands. The heat from the ovens, the smell of grease, seared meat, and the shouting of chefs enveloped her. She entered like an orange hurricane, tripping among the cooks, knocking over a tray of clean vegetables. "Watch out, Serena!" a kitchen assistant yelled, barely dodging her. "Get out of the way!" was the roar that followed. The swinging doors burst open again with violence, hitting the wall. Ethan Tan entered the kitchen, ignoring health regulations, ignoring the chaos he left in his wake. His designer suit didn't fit into that inferno of stainless steel and grease, but he advanced like a war tank. Serena looked back over her shoulder. Terror injected into her eyes. She reached the rear emergency exit, pushed it with the full weight of her body, and slipped out into the Singapore night. The clang of the metal door closing echoed against the brick walls. The back alley of the Fullerton Bay restaurant was the exact opposite of the coin. If inside everything was luxury, soft music, and French perfumes, outside it reeked of rotting garbage, moisture trapped in the asphalt, and the suffocating smog of the city. A flickering bulb cast a sickly yellow light on the industrial trash bins. Serena leaned against the cold brick wall, breathing through her mouth in ragged gasps. Her heart pounded so hard against her ribs that she feared they would break. She clutched her belly with both hands, feeling a sharp pang at the base of her pelvis. The baby moved, kicking forcefully, agitated by the level of stress and adrenaline flooding its mother's bloodstream. "Quiet, my love, quiet," Serena whispered, her voice broken, closing her eyes tightly, praying Ethan hadn't followed her, praying he would let her go. But fate and Ethan Tan never accepted no for an answer. The heavy metal door burst open with a brutal kick. Ethan stepped into the alley. The contrast of the darkness made him pause for a second, until his eyes adjusted, and there he saw her, cowering by the trash bins, dirty, trembling, wrapped in that cursed orange uniform that churned his stomach with indignation and pain. He walked towards her with slow, heavy, predatory steps. Each step echoed on the wet asphalt. Serena raised her chin, forcing herself to construct the wall of ice that had saved her 9 months ago. She had to lie. She had to be cruel. If she showed weakness, he would dig until he found the truth of why she had left him. "Go, Ethan!" Serena yelled before he was 2 meters away. "I don't want to see you. Leave me alone." Ethan stopped just inches from her. He was so tall that she was forced to look up. His face was tense, the veins in his neck bulging with suppressed rage. There was no trace of the loving, gentle man who used to make her breakfast on Sundays. In front of her stood the shark of Singapore's property market. "I'm not going anywhere, Serena. Not until you tell me what the hell this means." Ethan sharply indicated her belly with a movement of his head. "Explain it to me because my accountant could sum up this garbage better. You leave saying you hate me, that you have a magnate waiting for you. You leave without asking for alimony, without taking a single cent, supposedly to live in Europe. And 9 months later, I find you mopping up vomit in a restaurant in my city, 10 kilograms lighter, and 8 months pregnant." Serena clenched her fists. Her nails dug into her palms. "It's none of your business. My life is no longer yours." "Of course it is," Ethan roared, slamming his closed fist against the brick wall right next to Serena's head. The impact caused small pieces of mortar to fall. Serena jumped, startled, but didn't look away. "Look me in the eyes, Serena. Tell me the truth. Is that child mine?" The question detonated in the alley. The silence that followed was only interrupted by their agitated breathing and the electric hum of the broken lamp. Ethan lowered his gaze to her belly. His breathing became erratic. A mixture of terrified hope and desolate fury crossed his face. If that baby was his, if his own child had been cleaning tables, going hungry, dragging itself across the floor while he closed multi-million-dollar deals, toasting with champagne, the guilt would destroy him. Serena saw the vulnerability in his eyes. She saw how the businessman's armor cracked for a second. It broke her soul. She wanted to hug him. She wanted to cry on his expensive, stained suit and tell him that she loved him, that she never stopped loving him, that she sold all her valuables to pay the extortionists who threatened to fabricate evidence to put him in a federal prison. She wanted to tell him the child was his, but the thugs had been clear. If he finds out, we not only put him in prison, we kill him in jail. You leave and disappear, and if you speak, the bastard won't be born. Serena swallowed the knot of tears, hardened her jaw, and drew strength from desperation. Her face transformed, adopting a mask of forced arrogance, cold and empty. Don't be delusional, Ethan, she said, spitting the words with a contempt that burned her throat. The child is not yours, it's his. The man I left you for. Ethan felt a bucket of ice water emptied over his nape. Physical pain shot through him. His muscles tensed until they ached. His? Ethan let out an ironic, harsh laugh, full of disbelief and resentment. The European millionaire? And where is he? Why is a magnate's wife cleaning Mr. Cheng's messes dressed in orange? Where are your luxuries, Serena? Serena looked away, unable to sustain the lie in front of his piercing eyes. She looked towards the trash. He abandoned me. She blurted out the lie, her voice trembling but maintaining the persona. It was a mistake. I was stupid. The scoundrel dumped me when I told him I was pregnant. He cancelled my cards and left me stranded. I had to come back to Singapore. I had to find any job to keep from starving. Ethan processed every word. His eyes scanned Serena's face like a lie detector. He observed her lip, chapped from dehydration. He observed the posture of her hunched shoulders. He observed the shame on her face. So that's it, Ethan murmured, stepping back half a pace as if her mere proximity would contaminate him. You traded me for a fantasy. You went to wallow with an idiot for money, and when he left you with the problem in your belly, you ended up sweeping misery. Karma is a ruthless bitch, isn't it, Serena? Ethan's words were like stabs directly to the heart. Serena felt like she was drowning, but she nodded slowly, accepting the punishment, accepting the hatred in the eyes of the man for whom she was sacrificing her life. Yes, Ethan, she whispered, a treacherous tear finally escaping and rolling down her dirty cheek. I'm stupid. You're right. You've seen how miserable I am. You've had your revenge. Now, please, leave. Let me go back to work so I can buy diapers for my child. Ethan looked at her for a long second. The hatred was evident, yes, but Ethan Tan's intelligence was not dimmed by anger. There was something in Serena's voice. There was something in the way she clenched her teeth, in the way her body trembled, not from fear, but from physical pain. The pieces didn't quite fit. The interested and ruthless woman she described wouldn't ask for forgiveness with her eyes while spitting venom with her mouth. But pride is a blind monster. Ethan straightened his posture, adjusted the lapels of his suit with a calculating gesture, putting back on his unbreakable steel armor. His face became an unexpressive, lethal mask. I pity you, Serena, he said, his voice cold as ice. I hope minimum wage is enough for your pride. Without another word, Ethan Tan turned around and walked back to the restaurant's rear door. He opened it forcefully, entered the kitchen, and let the metal door slam shut behind him, leaving Serena alone in the darkness of the alley. The instant he disappeared, Serena's knees gave out. She collapsed onto the dirty asphalt, clutching her belly tightly, and broke into uncontrollable, silent, gut-wrenching sobs, drowning in her own pain amidst the trash. She had saved Ethan once more. But inside, Ethan did not walk towards the exit door. He walked directly to his table. He took out his phone and dialed a number. His instinct burned like a deafening alarm. Serena's version of the story was perfect, too perfect to be real. And he was going to find out the truth, no matter the cost. Ethan Tan crossed the swinging kitchen doors in reverse, leaving behind the inferno of heat and frying pans to rejoin the cold, perfumed air of the Fullerton Bay restaurant. His face was a mask carved from granite. No one in the luxurious dining room dared to look him directly in the eyes, but everyone felt the lethal vibration emanating from his navy blue suit. A few meters away, next to the service station, Mr. Cheng, the general manager, stood stiff as a board, sweating cold and wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. He trembled. He knew he had crossed a line that could cost him his career. Ethan ignored Mr. Cheng as if he were a cockroach crushed on the marble and walked with long, determined strides to the central table. The three real estate executives, who had been petrified for 10 minutes, immediately straightened up at his arrival. The lead lawyer, a gray-haired man in a gray suit, forced a nervous smile and pushed the ink-stained contract to the center of the glass table. Ethan, good to have you back, the lawyer said, clearing his throat, pretending that the scene of physical violence and public humiliation he had just witnessed had never occurred. I suppose it was a misunderstanding with the staff. Shall we continue? Here's the pen. Just your signature left to close the acquisition of the Fullerton Bay restaurant for the agreed SGD 15 million. Ethan stood in front of the oak chair. He did not take the solid gold Mont Blanc pen. He didn't even glance at the paper. His eyes, dark and turbulent, swept across the restaurant's ostentatious ceiling, the crystal chandeliers, the mahogany walls, and finally fixed on the service door through which Serena had fled. That image wouldn't let him breathe. His ex-wife, the haughty woman who demanded hothouse roses every Friday, hidden among the trash in an alley, terrified, protecting an 8-month belly. Something was disgustingly wrong with that entire equation. "The deal is off," Ethan blurted out. His voice was low, flat, cutting the air like a guillotine. The three men at the table widened their eyes. The gray-haired lawyer sprang to his feet, paling. "What, Ethan? My God, we've been negotiating this for 3 months. The price is a steal. The market is at its peak. You can't back out now over an altercation with a cleaner. We'll give you an additional discount. How about it? 5% off for the trouble." Ethan placed both hands on the glass table and leaned his large frame towards the executives. The silent threat in his posture made the three men instinctively lean back in their chairs. "You're not listening to me," Ethan said, pronouncing each syllable with chilling slowness. "I don't want the restaurant. I'm no longer interested in buying the commercial unit." He paused, letting panic settle on the sellers' faces before delivering the final blow. "I want the entire building." The silence at the table was absolute. The lawyer blinked, unable to process the twist. "The commercial tower, Ethan? That's not for sale, and even if it were, we're talking about more than SGD 150 million. The owners won't part with the main property. Everything has a price." Ethan cut in, straightening up and buttoning his suit jacket with a sharp movement. "Offer them SGD 250 million. Cash. Immediate transfer in 24 hours. Close the deal today before midnight." "SGD 250 million? That's insane, Ethan. You're brutally overpaying. No analyst would approve this whim. Why on earth do you want the entire building?" Ethan turned his head slightly and fixed his murderous gaze directly on Mr. Cheng, who stood petrified in the distance, half listening to the conversation. "Because as the owner of the restaurant, I am a simple investor. As the owner of the building, I am God. In this piece of land," Ethan raised his voice enough for the manager to hear him, "and my first divine order will be that the Fullerton Bay restaurant has a new proprietor. A new contract will be drafted, and the first non-negotiable clause demands the immediate dismissal of Mr. Cheng, without severance, without a letter of recommendation. And if he dares to sue, I will use my entire corporate law firm to ensure he never gets another job, not even cleaning toilets in a petrol station. Was I clear?" The lawyer swallowed hard, nodding frantically, terrified by the display of pure, unhinged power Ethan had just deployed. "Crystal clear, Ethan. I'll draft the offer immediately." Ethan turned and walked towards the main exit of the restaurant. As he moved between the tables, he pulled out his cell phone and dialed the only number that mattered to him at that moment. It wasn't his assistant's or his bank's. It was Sergeant Tan, his head of security and private investigator, an ex-SAF commando specialized in intelligence, who could find a ghost at the bottom of the sea if paid enough. "Sarge," a voice answered on the second ring. "Mr. Tan," Sergeant Tan confirmed. "Sarge, drop whatever you're doing. I need you to deploy all your men right now," Ethan ordered, pushing open the heavy glass doors of the restaurant and stepping out into the warm Singapore night. "I want a full report on Serena Lim, my ex-wife." "Sir, I thought that matter was closed 9 months ago when she went to Paris." "She never made it to Paris, Sarge. I just saw her. She's here in Singapore. She's working as a cleaner and she's 8 months pregnant." There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. Sergeant Tan, accustomed to extreme situations, immediately understood the gravity of the matter from the fractured tone in his boss's voice. "Understood, sir. What perimeter am I looking for?" "Everything," Ethan growled, getting into the back of his armored SUV while his chauffeur closed the door. "I want her bank accounts. I want medical records from public and private hospitals. I want security footage from ATMs. I want to know where she sleeps, what she eats, who she talks to, and what the hell she has done every single damn day since she walked out of my good-class bungalow 9 months ago. I want to know who the lover who supposedly got her pregnant is, or if he ever existed. That requires penetrating closed systems, boss. It's expensive and takes time. I don't give a damn about the cost," Ethan yelled, hitting the back of the co-driver's seat with a closed fist, making the interior of the SUV tremble. "I pay you to bring me truths, not excuses. I want her stripped bare on paper, and I want that damn file on my desk before dawn." If you don't have it by 6 a.m., you're fired. Yes, sir. On it. Ethan cut the call and threw the phone against the leather seat beside him. He covered his face with both hands, rubbing his eyes in desperation. The image of Serena in the alley, trembling, humiliated, rubbing her belly with her cracked hands, replayed in his mind like a horror movie on loop. "I pity you, Serena," he had said. Ethan clenched his teeth until his jaw ached. If the child was that stupid Millionaire's, he himself would see to it that both of them were ruined. But if the numbers added up, if that 8-month belly was the result of their last nights together, Ethan knew in that instant that the world was going to burn. The discovery of the abyss. It was 4:15 a.m. The main office of Tan Real Estate, on the 40th floor of one of Singapore's tallest towers, was steeped in gloom. Only Ethan's desk lamp cast a cone of cold light over the immense tempered glass table. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sleeping, a carpet of orange and white lights that seemed infinite. Ethan hadn't taken off his suit. He had been pacing in circles like a caged lion for hours, drinking black coffee that now tasted like acid in his empty stomach. He couldn't close his eyes without seeing Serena's terrified gaze. The sound of the electronic door opening broke the silence of the early morning. Sergeant Tan entered. He wore a dark leather jacket, and his face, weathered by years in the SAF, looked unusually pale and tense. In his hands, he carried a thick, bulging manila envelope that seemed to weigh a ton. Ethan stopped dead. His breathing quickened. "Tell me you have it, Sarge." Sergeant Tan advanced to the desk and let the envelope fall onto the glass with a dry, heavy, definitive thud. He didn't look Ethan in the eyes. "I have it, sir. We tracked everything. We cross-referenced data from IRAS, CPF records, CCTVs, and hacked into her cancelled card history. I have everything." Ethan approached the desk, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the envelope. "Who is the guy?" he asked, his voice hoarse, refusing to open the package. "Who is the European? Where is the coward who left her like this hiding?" Sergeant Tan swallowed and clasped his hands behind his back in a parade rest position, adopting a strictly professional tone to soften the blow. "There is no European, Mr. Tan. There was never any magnate. We checked migration databases and global airline records. Serena Lim has not left Singapore in the last 9 months. She didn't even step foot in an airport. The story of the millionaire lover in Paris was a fabricated lie." Ethan felt the air snatched from his lungs. His fingers grazed the edge of the envelope. "A lie," he whispered, feeling a sharp ringing in his ears. "Then why did she leave me? Why did she leave the house screaming that she hated me? Open the envelope, boss. You won't like the answers." Ethan violently ripped open the manila paper. A stack of color photographs and dozens of financial documents fell scattered across the illuminated glass. The first photograph hit Ethan directly in the center of his chest. It showed Serena in an old, worn sweater, walking on a broken pavement in an older HDB estate in Jurong West, one of the less affluent areas of the city. She carried plastic bags from the supermarket, and her belly was already very evident. In the second photo, Serena was climbing an oxidized spiral staircase, clinging to the metal railing with an expression of absolute exhaustion. "These are captures from neighborhood security cameras from 2 weeks ago," Sergeant Tan explained, pointing at the image. "That's her current address. She lives in a small rental room of corrugated iron and cement, 12 scope. The bathroom is shared with 4 other tenants. She pays SGD 600 inches rent per month and is 2 months behind." "My God," Ethan exclaimed, taking a step back, clutching his chest as if he had been shot. "She was my wife. She owned all of this. Why is she living in misery? Why didn't she take money from our joint accounts before the divorce? I never blocked her cards until she disappeared." Sergeant Tan slid a bank statement across the glass, pushing it towards Ethan. The numbers were highlighted in fluorescent yellow marker. "Sir, she emptied her personal accounts 3 days before asking you for a divorce. She sold her Mercedes car. She pawned all her jewelry, including the 5-carat engagement ring you gave her. She liquidated her designer handbags and branded clothes to pawn shops below their real value. She raised almost SGD 3.5 million in cash in less than 72 hours. Ethan's brain collapsed. The financial math made no sense. SGD 3.5 million, and she's living in a corrugated iron rooftop room, starving. That's impossible. What did she spend the money on? Drugs? Gambling? Sergeant Tan shook his head slowly, and the compassion in his hard military eyes was what truly terrified Ethan. "She didn't spend it, sir. She transferred it. Every last cent." Sergeant Tan pointed to a sheet of encrypted electronic transfers that his team had managed to decrypt that very morning. A single deposit of SGD 3.5 million appears in a ghost account in the Cayman Islands. We trace the parent account using federal intelligence contacts. That offshore account doesn't belong to any lover, Mr. Tan. It belongs to the proxies of Marcus Wong and Kelvin Lee. The names of the two men detonated in Ethan's head like an atomic bomb. Marcus and Kelvin, his former senior partners, the men Ethan had discovered committing massive fraud in the property development firm a year ago. Ethan had expelled them from the company in a brutal board meeting, taking away their percentage and threatening to send them to Changi prison if they ever came near his empire again. What does Serena have to do with Marcus and Kelvin? Ethan felt the room spinning, the cold light of the lamp burning his eyes. We reviewed the security cameras around your good-class bungalow from 9 months ago, exactly 2 days before Mrs. Serena asked you for a divorce. Do you remember you were on a business trip to New York that week? Ethan nodded mechanically. Cold sweat began to bead on his forehead. Sergeant Tan pulled a final photograph from the bottom of the envelope. It was dark, grainy, taken by a street camera, but the image was unmistakable. It showed the wrought iron entrance of the Tan mansion. And there, standing in front of the gate, intercepting Serena, who had just gotten out of her car, were Marcus and Kelvin, flanked by 2 armed men. They intercepted her when she was alone, sir, Sergeant Tan said, his voice grave and somber. According to underworld informants I contacted an hour ago, Marcus and Kelvin had in their possession falsified documents and bought witnesses sufficient to incriminate you for the fraud they committed. The false evidence was perfect, Ethan. If they presented it to a federal judge, you would not only lose the company, you would spend 20 years in Changi prison. Ethan's knees gave way. He had to grab the edge of the glass desk to keep from falling to the floor. Air wouldn't enter his lungs. They extorted Serena. Sergeant Tan continued mercilessly, uncovering the well of horror. They demanded SGD 3.5 million in cash to give her the only copy of that false evidence and leave you alone. And they set one more condition. She had to divorce you and disappear. If you tried to search for the extortionists, or if she told you a single word of the blackmail, they would kill you and her. The silence that filled the 40th floor office was deafening. Ethan looked down at the scattered photos. Serena walking in the worn sweater. Serena sleeping on a mattress on the floor. Serena cleaning tables at the Fullerton Bay restaurant to earn tips and pay SGD 600 inches rent. She hadn't betrayed him. She hadn't left with another man. She had abandoned him to save his life and his empire. She had taken on the role of the cruel villain, enduring his hatred and resentment for 9 months. Because it was the only way to protect him, she had sold her last drop of dignity to pay the ransom for Ethan's freedom. And the baby. Oh God, the baby. Ethan covered his mouth with his hand, stifling a guttural sob, a sound that seemed torn from the depths of his soul. Hot, furious tears welled in his dark eyes, falling onto the glass desk and staining the financial documents. If there was no European lover, if she had never been with another man, if the 9 months perfectly coincided with the last week they slept together before she signed the divorce papers, the baby, Ethan's voice broke into 1,000 pieces, choking on tears. He fell to his knees on the plush gray carpet of his luxury office, clutching his chest, shattered by the level of sacrifice his wife had made. The baby is mine. That child is mine. The most powerful man in the city, the ruthless businessman who felt no pity for anyone, collapsed on the floor, crying like a child, as he realized what he had done. He had humiliated the mother of his child. He had left her alone in a dark alley, rubbing her tired belly while he looked at her with disgust. Sergeant Tan stepped forward, kneeling beside him. Mr. Tan, get up. We have a much worse problem. Ethan looked up, his eyes red, his face bathed in tears. What could be worse than this nightmare? Sergeant Tan handed him a final paper, a medical report from a polyclinic. When we traced her medical visits, we found this. Mrs. Lim did not go to work at the Fullerton Bay restaurant today. Her shift supervisor sent her to the public polyclinic 3 hours ago. Her severe malnutrition and the extreme stress she was subjected to last night have caused life-threatening complications. Mrs. Lim has severe preeclampsia. Ethan felt the world stop completely. She's in the emergency room at Singapore General Hospital, and the doctors say she and the baby won't make it past tonight. Ethan Tan doesn't remember standing up. He doesn't remember crossing the glass doors of his corporate office or the dizzying descent in the private elevator from the 40th floor. His mind had fractured, leaving only room for a primitive, desperate instinct to reach her. The elevator doors opened in the underground parking lot. The keys! Give me the damn keys! Ethan roared, snatching the control for the armored SUV from his chauffeur, who recoiled, startled, against the concrete wall. Sergeant Tan ran behind him, getting into the passenger seat just as the SUV's V8 engine roared with a deafening ferocity. The tires screeched against the polished pavement, leaving a trail of black smoke and burning rubber as Ethan accelerated towards the exit ramp. The speedometer needle shot up. It was 4:32 a.m. The streets of Singapore were empty, shrouded in the gray mist of dawn. Ethan drove like a man possessed, running red lights, crossing main avenues at over 160 kilometers per hour. His hands gripped the leather-wrapped steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles seemed about to burst through his skin. In his head, the words from the previous night repeated like relentless torture. "I pity you, Serena. I hope minimum wage is enough for your pride." Ethan let out a choked cry, a guttural sound that resonated inside the luxury cabin. He hit his chest with a closed fist, trying to tear out the physical pain that was crushing his lungs. "It was me, Sarge," Ethan cried, his voice torn by tears. "It was I who pushed her to the limit. Yesterday, I cornered her in that alley. I yelled that she was trash. I let that imbecile manager humiliate her in front of me. She was saving my life, and I was destroying hers." Sergeant Tan, clinging to the safety handle due to the vehicle's suicidal speed, pulled out his phone. "Sir, focus on the road. I've already contacted the director of surgery at Mount Elizabeth Hospital. I have 3 private specialists en route to SGH. They have orders to transfer her to the best intensive care suite in the country as soon as we arrive. Money will not be an issue. I don't give a damn about money," Ethan roared, his eyes bloodshot, tears blurring his vision. "If she dies, Sarge, if my son isn't born, I'm going to burn this entire city down, starting with myself." In the distance, the emergency lights of Singapore General Hospital cut through the darkness. It was an enormous, gray building, worn by time and lack of budget, a place saturated with pain and scarcity, the exact opposite of the world of marble and gold in which Ethan had lived while his pregnant wife cleaned tables to survive. Ethan slammed the SUV to a halt, invading the ambulance lane, and got out before the engine completely stopped. He ran towards the emergency doors. The impact of reality inside the hospital was like being hit by a baseball bat in the stomach. The waiting room was a suffocating chaos. Dozens of people slept on hard plastic chairs, women crying in the corners, the smell of cheap disinfectant mixed with sweat and illness. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting a deathly pallor on the peeling walls. Ethan stormed through the room, pushing people aside without ceremony. His imposing figure in the designer navy blue suit, now wrinkled and without a tie, violently contrasted with the misery of the place. He reached the reception counter, a dirty armored glass behind which an exhausted nurse typed on an old computer. "Serena Lim," Ethan demanded, hitting the glass with the palm of his open hand. "Where is she? She was admitted 3 hours ago." The nurse looked up, irritated. "Sir, quiet down. This is a hospital. You have to take a number and wait. I'm not waiting a damn second." Ethan roared, his voice echoing throughout the emergency room, making the security guards at the door stand alert. "I am Ethan Tan. I will buy this entire hospital and fire you and every damn executive if you don't tell me which bed my wife is in within the next 5 seconds. Sergeant Tan arrived just behind, showing his military identification and intervening before the guards drew their batons. "It's a critical emergency, miss. Patient with severe preeclampsia. Serena Lim, please." The nurse paled at the men's tone and quickly checked the screen. "Resuscitation bay at the end of the corridor. Past the red doors. But you can't go in there. It's restricted access." Ethan didn't wait for her to finish the sentence. He ran towards the double red doors, pushing them open with both arms. The resuscitation bay was an inferno of movement, machines beeping frantically, nurses running with IV bags, doctors shouting orders. And there, in bed number 4, separated only by a stained fabric curtain, he found her. Ethan's world stopped. Oxygen left the room. Serena lay on the white sheets, pale as marble. Her lips, once full and rosy, now had a bluish, chapped tone. She had oxygen tubes in her nose and 3 IVs stuck into her thin, bruised arms. The disgusting orange cleaning uniform had been cut with scissors to attach the monitors, exposing her enormous 8-month belly. But what truly shattered Ethan's soul wasn't the tubes or the machines. It was seeing her hands. Serena's hands, falling inertly to the sides of the bed, were covered in sores, cuts, and chemical burns from using industrial bleaches without protective gloves. The man who controlled the financial destiny of half the country fell to his knees beside the cheap metal bed. "My love," Ethan whispered, his voice broken, choking on his own tears. "Serena, my God, what did they do to you? What did I let them do to you?" He took one of those battered hands, bringing it to his lips and kissing every scar, every burn, bathing her skin with fervent tears. Forgive me, my life, please. Don't leave me. I beg you, don't leave me. The alarms of the cardiac monitor above the bed began to beep with a sharp, rapid, terrifying cadence. The green line moved erratically. Sir, you have to get out of here right now, a nurse shouted, trying to pull Ethan away from the gurney. I won't let go, Ethan roared, clinging to his wife's hand as if it were a lifeline in the middle of the ocean. A young doctor with a wrinkled gown, deep dark circles under his eyes, and a face hardened by 1,000 lost battles in the emergency room, pushed his way through the curtains. It was Dr. Ramesh, the head on duty. Clear the area. Prepare 100 milligrams of lebetalol intravenously. Her pressure is already 190/120, the doctor ordered, checking the monitor screen before fixing his furious eyes on Ethan. Who the hell are you, and what are you doing in my resuscitation bay? Security, get him out of here. Sergeant Tan intercepted the guards at the curtain entrance, forming an impenetrable wall with his body. Ethan slowly stood up, without letting go of Serena's hand. His dark eyes, flooded with tears, reflected the ferocity of a wounded lion. I am Ethan Tan, she is my wife, and it's my child in her womb. Doctor. Ramesh stopped dead, looked at Ethan's $1,000 suit, looked at his Swiss watch, and then looked at the malnourished, dirty, and shattered patient, wearing a cheap janitor's uniform. Indignation crossed the doctor's face like lightning. The husband? The doctor let out a bitter, contemptuous laugh, taking a step towards Ethan until he was inches from his face. He didn't care about the magnate's money or aura of power. In his emergency room, he was the ultimate authority. Where the hell have you been for the last 8 months, Mr. Tan? The blow of the question hit Ethan squarely in the face. He wanted to answer, wanted to explain the deception, the extortion by his partners, the damned pride that had blinded him. But the words died in his throat. Everything sounded like empty excuses in front of his wife's agonizing body. I was an imbecile, Ethan managed to articulate, his voice broken by absolute regret. I was blind, but I'm here now. I have the 3 best specialists from Mount Elizabeth Hospital waiting outside. I demand you transfer her immediately. I've already ordered a medical helicopter. I'm taking her to private intensive care. Dr. Ramesh shook his head, his expression turning somber, almost ominous. Save your wallet, Mr. Tan. You cannot transfer her anywhere. If I move her from this bed, if I put her in an ambulance or a helicopter, your wife will go into cardiac arrest before reaching the parking lot, and the baby will suffocate in minutes. You stay here. Ethan felt his blood run cold. Panic, raw, and suffocating, completely paralyzed him. What does she have? Ethan whispered, terror disfiguring his features. Tell me exactly what she has and how I fix it. Doctor. Ramesh took a gray aluminum folder from the foot of the bed and threw it at Ethan's chest. Ethan caught it by instinct. Read it yourself, since you seem to have answers for everything, the doctor spat, adjusting Serena's oxygen mask. It's not just preeclampsia, Tan. Your wife is dying of chronic exhaustion and severe malnutrition. Her hemoglobin level is 7. She's anemic. This woman's body has been consuming itself to keep the baby alive. Ethan opened the folder. The medical numbers danced before his eyes. But the paramedics' margin notes, who picked her up at the restaurant, were daggers directly to his heart. Patient found unconscious. 1-4. Hour daily work shifts on her feet. Minimal caloric intake in recent months. Severe post-traumatic stress. I checked her belongings, looking for an emergency contact. The doctor continued, pointing to a cheap, torn cloth bag in the corner of the room. She didn't even have a single dollar to buy a bottle of water, Mr. Tan, but she had her pawn shop receipts. She's been pawning even her shoes to pay for consultations at a neighborhood clinic, making sure the baby received the vitamins she wasn't consuming. Ethan walked clumsily to the plastic chair, took Serena's old cloth bag, and opened it with trembling hands. Inside, there was no designer makeup or golden cards. There was a mended sweater, an empty Tupperware with remnants of white rice, 3 wrinkled pawn receipts, and in a protective plastic envelope, perfectly cared for unlike the rest of her belongings, a black and white ultrasound scan. Ethan took out the image. It was a perfect profile. A small nose, a forehead, the miracle of life, making its way in the midst of the hell she had endured in solitude. On the bottom edge, in Serena's cursive handwriting, was a phrase written in blue ink. So your daddy stays safe, my love. Ethan's crying erupted uncontrollably, destroying any facade of a tough man he had left. He fell onto the bed, embracing Serena's swollen belly, staining the white sheet with his tears of agony. "Wake up, please, Serena, wake up," Ethan cried, stroking his wife's cold face. "I know everything now. I know what you did for me. I know you sold your life to save me from those bastards. Don't die, for God's sake. Don't leave this empty empire without you." "Doctor." Ramesh observed him, his anger slowly dissolving at the raw magnate's pain, understanding that the story behind that tragedy was much darker than simple abandonment. "Mr. Tan," the doctor said, his voice lowering, adopting a clinical cold urgency. "Her blood pressure isn't responding. Serena's kidneys are starting to fail due to the preeclampsia." Ethan lifted his face, his eyes swollen. "What does that mean?" The doctor looked at the monitors, then at Serena's belly. "It means your wife's body can no longer sustain the pregnancy. The extreme stress she suffered last night was the final trigger. The placenta is detaching." The sharp, continuous sound of the fetal monitor began to blare in the small room, filling the space with the warning of imminent death. The baby's heart rate was dropping drastically. Code red in Bay 4. "Doctor!" Ramesh shouted towards the corridor, his voice cutting the air with the authority of controlled panic. "Stop operating room 2. Call neonatology immediately." The swinging doors burst open. 4 nurses rushed in, unlocking the brakes of Serena's gurney. "Where are you taking her?" Ethan stood in their way, terrified, refusing to let go of her hand. "To the operating room, Tan," the doctor yelled, pushing him aside. "We have to get that child out in the next 10 minutes, or both of them will die on this gurney. Fast, push." Ethan ran alongside the gurney down the long corridor illuminated by white fluorescent lights. The wheels screeched against the linoleum floor. Serena remained unconscious, her head swaying with the movement, her breathing shallow and irregular. "I love you. I love you with all my life. Hold on, my love," Ethan whispered in her ear, running beside her until they reached the heavy metallic doors of the surgical area. "This far, Mr. Tan." A robust security guard blocked his path with both arms. The double doors slammed shut. Through the small glass of the door, Ethan saw Serena's gurney disappear under the powerful lights of the operating room. He stood there in the empty corridor, his hands stained with his wife's cold sweat, his son's ultrasound crumpled in his fist, his soul hanging by a thread. The man who yesterday believed he controlled everything, today could only beg on his knees to fate for a chance to redeem himself. The corridor outside the operating rooms was an endless tunnel of white light, cold and aseptic. Ethan Tan, the man who made the country's most ruthless boards of directors tremble, sat on the linoleum floor with his back against the wall, staring fixedly at his own hands. They were stained with blood, Serena's blood. The clock hanging above the double metal doors showed 5:47 a.m. He had endured an hour and 15 minutes of pure agony. Every second that the red surgery in progress light remained on, he felt a hydraulic press crushing his ribs. Sergeant Tan, stoically standing a couple of meters away, maintained his guard, rejecting urgent calls from the company. Nothing mattered. Ethan's real estate empire could burn to the ground at that very instant, and he wouldn't care at all. The sepulchral silence of the corridor was torn by the sound of hurried footsteps and someone's agitated breathing. The far doors burst open. A robust woman in her 50s crossed the threshold. She wore her street clothes poorly over her Fullerton Bay restaurant uniform. Her face was drenched in sweat and tears. It was Auntie May, Serena's fellow cleaner, the only person who had shown her an ounce of humanity in that restaurant hell. "Serena! Where is Serena Lim?" Auntie May cried, her voice echoing off the sterile walls, desperately looking for a nurse. "They called me from the night shift. They said she was brought in code red." Sergeant Tan stepped forward to intercept her, following security protocol, but Ethan raised a trembling hand from the floor, silently ordering him to let her pass. Ethan recognized the woman. He had seen her out of the corner of his eye last night, watching in terror from the kitchen as Mr. Cheng humiliated his ex-wife. Auntie May stopped dead when she saw the magnate sprawled on the hospital floor. Her gaze shifted from absolute surprise to a boiling, deep, visceral hatred. She didn't care about Ethan's expensive suit, nor the presence of the giant bodyguard. She advanced until she stood in front of him, pointing a trembling finger. "You," Auntie May spat with a contempt that made Ethan look up. "You're that bastard from last night, the SGD 2000 monster. You came to finish the job. You came to see if the humiliation you put her through last night finally killed her." Ethan swallowed. The lump in his throat was so large he could barely breathe. He stood up slowly, leaning against the wall. He didn't defend himself. He didn't raise his voice. His bloodshot eyes and face, distorted by pain, took Auntie May by surprise, but the woman didn't back down. I'm her husband, Ethan said, his voice reduced to a hoarse, fractured whisper. I'm the baby's father. Auntie May's eyes widened. The impact of the revelation seemed to paralyze her for a second. Then she let out a bitter, dry laugh, full of venom. The husband? Auntie May closed the distance, fixing her eyes on Ethan's. Where the hell was the husband when that girl cried until she vomited in the restaurant bathroom because she didn't even have money for a paracetamol? Where was the father of the year when she ate scraps from customers' plates because she hadn't eaten for 3 days to pay for the polyclinic? Every word from Auntie May was a point-blank shot to Ethan's chest. He already knew the cold facts thanks to Sergeant Tan. He knew about the extortion by his ex-partners. He knew about the SGD 3.5 million transferred to the Cayman Islands. He knew about the death threat that forced her to pretend she didn't love him. But the harshness of what Serena had lived through day after day, the physical reality of her sacrifice, was gutting him alive. I didn't know, Ethan whispered, closing his eyes tightly, letting the tears flow again. She lied to me, to protect me. I thought she had left me for another. Of course she protected you, you blind fool. Auntie May burst out, hitting Ethan's chest with both hands. An act for which Sergeant Tan would have broken necks under any other circumstance. But Ethan let himself be hit, receiving the punishment he felt he deserved. That girl came looking for work 8 months ago, trembling like a leaf. She was terrified that some men in black suits would find her. She hid every time a luxury car passed on the avenue. She sold her coats in the middle of December to buy cheap blankets, and all the damn time, she stroked her belly and whispered to her baby that everything was going to be okay, that the sacrifice was worth it because their daddy was safe. Ethan covered his face with his hands, sobbing uncontrollably, his shoulders trembling violently. I lent her money for bus fare, Auntie May continued, her own voice breaking with tears. I begged her to rest, not to carry the heavy trays, but she said she couldn't, that if she was kicked out of that rooftop room, the baby would be born on the street. And yesterday when you appeared, I saw her soul drop to the floor. You were the hero of her stories, the man she was dying of hunger for, and you looked at her with disgust. You let Mr. Cheng treat her like trash. Enough, Ethan pleaded, falling to his knees again, shattered into 1,000 pieces, his forehead touching the cold hospital floor. Please, enough. I was an imbecile. I was a coward blinded by pride. I would give my entire life at this very instant to be on that operating table in her place. Auntie May looked down at the most powerful man in the city, reduced to ashes by the weight of his own arrogance. The woman's fury slowly transformed into deep pity. She knelt halfway and placed a hand on his shoulder. Then pray to God that she is stronger than your pride, Mr. Tan, Auntie May whispered harshly. Because last night, after you left, I found her lying in the garbage alley. She was losing blood. She told me she couldn't take it anymore. She told me, at least he hates me enough not to look for me again. He's safe now. The metallic sound of the double doors opening interrupted the sentence. The red surgery light went out. Ethan sprang to his feet, wiping his tear-stained face, his breath completely held. Dr. Ramesh came out of the operating room. His green gown was stained with dark blood. He removed his surgical mask, revealing a face haggard from exhaustion, drenched in sweat. He sighed deeply and looked at Ethan. Doctor? Ethan could barely utter the word, absolute terror chilling his blood. The doctor nodded slowly. We lost her twice on the table. We had to use the defibrillator. The doctor paused, measuring his words in front of the magnate on the verge of collapse. But your wife has the survival instinct of a wild animal defending its young. She survived the emergency C-section, and we managed to stop the internal bleeding. Ethan let out a choked cry, leaning against the wall, feeling his soul return to his body. Auntie May covered her mouth, breaking into tears of relief. And my son? Ethan asked, his heart pounding 1,000 beats per hour. The baby is alive. It's a boy, the doctor replied, managing a very slight, compassionate smile. Premature, underweight, and with severe respiratory difficulties. He has just been intubated and transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit in an incubator. The battle has just begun for him, Mr. Tan, but he is breathing. Your wife, against all medical and human odds, managed to keep him alive long enough. I want to see her. I need to see her right now, Ethan demanded, desperation, injecting new energy into him. She's in the post-operative recovery room. She's just regaining consciousness from the anesthesia, the doctor warned. She's extremely weak. A strong scare or a spike in stress right now could cause a heart attack. Go in alone and for God's sake try not to upset her. Ethan nodded frantically. Left Auntie May crying in Sergeant Tan's embrace. gently pushed open the doors of the sterile corridor, and walked towards the room at the end. He was going to get his family back. The recovery room was in semi-darkness. The only sound was the constant, rhythmic, miraculous beeping of the cardiac monitor. It smelled of iodine, strong disinfectant, and freshly washed sheets. Ethan stopped at the threshold, feeling the air thicken. Serena was in the center bed. She looked like a broken porcelain doll. Her skin had a translucent pallor. Her hair was matted to her forehead with cold sweat, and her arms, bruised from the IV lines of the blood transfusion, rested inertly on the white blankets. The immense swelling of her belly had disappeared, leaving a bandaged flatness that evidenced the brutal procedure she had just undergone. Ethan advanced slowly, terrified that the sound of his shoes would break the fragile bubble of life that kept his wife breathing. He stopped beside the metal railing of the bed, observing the face he had loved every day of his adult life. The face he had hated for 9 months because of a lie fabricated to save his life. The level of devotion this woman had shown him was something he, with all his power and money, could never repay in 1,000 lifetimes. Slowly, as if her eyelids weighed tons of lead, Serena began to react. Her eyelashes trembled, her brown eyes opened, disoriented, clouded by narcotics, trying to focus on the gray ceiling of the room. Her gaze slowly lowered and met the figure in the navy blue suit standing beside her bed. Serena's entire body tensed abruptly. Terror returned to her eyes with the force of a tsunami. The heart rate monitor began to accelerate its beeping dramatically. Serena tried to sit up, ignoring the sharp, tearing pain of her C-section stitches in her abdomen. "No, no," Serena whispered, her voice like sandpaper, raising a weak hand to push Ethan's chest. "Ethan, go. Get out of here." "Quiet, my love, quiet. Don't move." Ethan held her shoulders with extreme gentleness, softly guiding her back onto the pillows. "You don't understand," Serena sobbed, breathing agitatedly, tears of pure panic spilling down her pale cheeks. "They're going to see you. If they know you're with me, if they suspect you found out something, they're going to put you in jail. They have proof, Ethan. They're going to destroy you. They're going to kill you. Please, get out. Pretend I don't exist. Hate me, but go." The level of sacrifice shattered him. Even now, freshly operated, having been a minute from death, her only instinct, her only thought, was to protect him. The property tycoon, the man who wouldn't back down from anyone in the country, fell heavily to his knees on the floor of the room. The sound of the thud echoed off the 4 walls. Ethan intertwined his clean, large hands with his wife's small, cracked and bruised hands. He clung to them and rested his forehead against the metal railing of the bed, surrendering completely. "It's over, Serena," Ethan said, lifting his tear-stained face, his voice firm but laden with absolute devotion. "The hell is over. I know everything." Serena stopped struggling. The cardiac monitor stabilized its rhythm abruptly, as if her heart had skipped a beat. What? She stammered, unable to believe it. "I know everything," Ethan repeated, squeezing her hands and kissing her injured knuckles. "I know the names, Marcus Wong, Kelvin Lee. I know about the account in the Cayman Islands, and I know about the thugs who intercepted you at the mansion gate. I know you sold your rings, your clothes, your entire world to pay the ransom for my freedom. I know you left me knowing I would hate you, just to save my life." The impact of Ethan's words broke Serena's last wall of resistance. The icy mask she had worn for 9 months of agony and humiliation completely crumbled. A primitive sob, laden with pain, loneliness, and relief, escaped her throat. "I was so scared, Ethan," Serena cried, squeezing her husband's hand with all her might. "Every day I thought they were going to harm you. When you yelled at me last night in the alley, I thought I had lost you forever. You never lost me." Ethan got up from the floor, sat on the edge of the bed, and carefully put his arms around Serena's shoulders, pulling her to his chest. He held her as if she were the most fragile crystal in the universe. "I never stopped loving you, not for a single second, even when pride blinded me. Forgive me for doubting you. Forgive me for not seeing that the love of my life was immolating herself for me. Forgive me for letting you fall into such misery." Serena buried her face in Ethan's stained and wrinkled shirt, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, feeling safe for the first time in almost a year. They cried together, clinging to each other in that gloomy hospital room, purging the poison of separation. After a few minutes, Serena pulled back slightly, her eyes injected with sudden panic. Her hands instinctively flew to her flat belly. "The baby?" she gasped, terrified. "Ethan, my baby. Tell me I didn't lose him. He's alive." Ethan smiled at her through his tears, stroking his wife's sweaty hair, looking at her with the greatest adoration a man could profess. Our son is alive, my love. He's a warrior, just like his mother. He's in the incubator recovering, but he's alive and safe. Serena closed her eyes and let her head fall onto the pillows, letting out a sigh of relief that emptied all the air from her lungs. Our son, she murmured with an exhausted smile crossing her gaunt face. Ethan looked at her in silence for a few seconds. Love and guilt swirled within him, but they were quickly replaced by a different, darker, colder energy. The men who had done this to his wife, the cowards who forced her to clean trash, 8 months pregnant, under death threats, were going to pay with blood. This was no longer about corporate business. This was a personal war, and Ethan Tan was going to use the full weight of his empire to erase them from the face of the earth. "You are going to rest now," Ethan whispered, kissing her forehead. "You are going to get strong for our son. I promise you, on my own life, that no one in this damn world will ever touch you again. The fear ends today." Serena opened her eyes, noticing the murderous glint in her husband's pupils. She knew Ethan. She knew the man of steel was about to unleash his true power. "Ethan, what are you going to do?" Ethan stood up, adjusting his ruined suit, adopting a posture that projected an unbreakable, dark, and lethal power. "Marcus and Kelvin think they stole my empire by blackmailing my wife," Ethan replied, his voice resonating in the empty room like a death sentence. "I'm going to show them what happens when you awaken the true owner of hell. As of today, I am the one who dictates the rules, and I will leave them nothing but ashes." The awakening of the beast. Ethan Tan walked out of the recovery room with a transformed face. The vulnerability and tears of the last few minutes had evaporated, giving way to surgical coldness. His footsteps echoed in the corridor like hammer blows. Sergeant Tan, who was waiting outside, immediately stood at attention, noticing the aura of death emanating from his boss. "Sarge," Ethan said without stopping, "I want the assault team members positioned. We are no longer collecting information, we are executing." "Sir, Marcus and Kelvin are in a private meeting at the Singapore Island Country Club, celebrating the quarter close," Sergeant Tan reported, keeping pace with the magnate's fast walk. "They think you're still holed up in your office or your luxury restaurant? They have no idea we found Mrs. Lim." Ethan stopped in front of a large window overlooking the city. The sun began to peek out from behind the mountains of Singapore, painting the sky a violent red. "They think they have me cornered with their false evidence," Ethan murmured, his voice dropping to a lethal register. "They don't know that last night I bought the Fullerton Bay building. They don't know I have the complete file of their original fraud that my wife paid to conceal. And, most importantly, they don't know they just turned a businessman into a butcher." He pulled out his phone and dialed a high-priority number. "Prosecutor, this is Ethan Tan." "Yes, the same. I have a package of evidence involving money laundering, aggravated extortion, and attempted murder. I want the arrest warrants ready within the hour. I don't care who you have to wake up. If the judge doesn't sign, I'll buy the courthouse myself." Ethan returned to the entrance of the neonatal ICU before leaving. Through the glass, he saw the small incubator, where his son, a tiny being connected to wires, fought for every breath. The child had his father's strong features and his mother's unbreakable resilience. "Hold on, little one," Ethan whispered against the glass. "Your daddy's going to clean up the world so you and your mommy never have to be scared again." Minutes later, 3 black armored SUVs sped out of the hospital. Ethan was in the back seat, reviewing a tablet with his enemy's final bank movements. Marcus and Kelvin had made a fatal error, underestimating the love of a man who has nothing to lose because he has already regained everything. The operation was swift and silent. As the sun finished rising, Ethan's SUVs and 2 Singapore police force patrol cars intercepted the ex-partners in the club's private parking lot. Marcus, fat and arrogant, dropped his whiskey glass upon seeing Ethan get out of the vehicle. Kelvin tried to run, but Sergeant Tan tackled him to the pavement before he took 3 steps. Ethan approached Marcus, who was trembling like a leaf. "Ethan, this is a misunderstanding. We can negotiate," Marcus stammered. Ethan didn't say a word. He delivered a dry punch to the stomach that left him breathless, then leaned over him, whispering in his ear. "Serena Lim sends her regards from the hospital. She survived, and now you two are going to wish you were never born. You're not going to a luxury cell, Marcus. You're going to the general wing, where the inmates know very well what happens to those who touch a pregnant woman." As the police led them away in handcuffs, Ethan watched his paper empires crumble. He had recovered the evidence. He had destroyed his enemies, and for the first time in 9 months, he could breathe without feeling ashes in his lungs. The price of redemption. 3 months later, The Tan mansion in Marina Bay was no longer the cold, silent mausoleum it once was. The garden was full of fresh flowers, and the air vibrated with a new energy. On the terrace, under the shade of a large oak tree, Serena was seated in a rattan rocking chair. She wore a white silk dress that highlighted her recovered beauty. Although her hands still bore small scars marks she refused to erase with laser surgery because they spoke of her as a survivor. In her arms slept Ethan Jr., the baby, who had spent 6 weeks in the incubator, now strong and healthy, with rosy cheeks that were the center of his parents' universe. Ethan came out onto the terrace, taking off his suit jacket. He approached from behind and kissed the crown of his wife's head. Then he gently stroked the baby's tiny hand with his index finger. "How are my treasures?" Ethan asked. His voice was full of a tenderness that no one in the business world would believe possible. "We're well, Ethan," Serena replied, giving him a radiant smile. "Auntie May called a while ago. She says the renovation of the new restaurant is going wonderfully. The employees can't believe they are now business partners." Ethan sat beside her. After the storm, his first action was to close the Fullerton Bay restaurant, dismiss Mr. Cheng with a lawsuit that left him on the streets, and reopen the place under the name Serena's Miracle, handing over management and a share of the profits to Auntie May and his wife's former colleagues who had helped her when she had nothing. "It's the least I could do," Ethan said, taking Serena's hand. "But none of that compensates for what you went through. Sometimes I wake up at night and I still see you in that orange alley." Serena placed a hand on his cheek, stopping his words. "That orange uniform is in the past, Ethan. It was the price I paid for us to be here today. Don't see it as a humiliation. See it as our armor. It taught me that I am stronger than I believed, and it taught me that you were worth every drop of sweat." Ethan pulled her close, embracing her and the baby in a protective circle. The man of steel had learned that true power resided not in bank accounts or 4-0 story buildings, but in the ability to sacrifice for what one loves. "I promise you," Ethan whispered, looking at the city skyline he once sought to conquer and now simply inhabited with peace, "that the rest of my life will be to serve you and our son. Never again will you be alone. Never again will there be secrets." Serena rested her head on her husband's shoulder. The afternoon sun bathed the scene in a golden light. The story that began with a fabricated divorce, an invented betrayal, and a humiliating cleaning uniform ended there with the victory of love over ambition. Ethan Tan, the magnate who had everything, finally understood that he was only truly rich the day he found his wife cleaning tables in the dark, because that day his heart beat again. Justice had been done. The enemies were behind bars, and the family was united. The ghost of the orange uniform could finally rest in peace.